Welcome to the debate. Today we're diving into a pretty radical thesis. The idea that physical reality, mathematical laws, even, potentially, conscious experience are maybe just different mathematical bases expressing the same fundamental cosmic information.
Right, and this comes from material exploring the base theory of cosmic information, suggesting, a deeply mathematical universe. And central to this is, well, this thing called the fractal of ceneeze.
Exactly. The fractal of ceneeze, this really quite mesmerizing, repeating pattern you get from digital root multiplication, it's definitely an extraordinary find in number theory, no question.
Agreed. But the core question for us today, I think, is this pattern, this fractal, a genuinely fundamental causal blueprint that actually dictates the structure of the whole omniverse? Or is it more of an elegant, emergent mathematical descriptor, something that arises naturally from the cycles of modular arithmetic?
And my position is clear. I believe the fractal of ceneeze is that fundamental causal structure. It's the blueprint. It's the mandatory translation dictionary, if you will, that explains exactly how information compresses and translates between these different bases. It's key to understanding why complexity scales the way it does. It shows physics isn't just data. It's compressed data following a universal grammar.
And, well, I come at it differently. I fully appreciate its power, its elegance as a tool for thinking. But I argue it's primarily emergent, a beautiful way to describe the symmetries you find in modular arithmetic, particularly with the digital root. Its value, immense, for summarizing patterns, for showing periodicity. But I think we need to resist the intellectual pull to just elevate elegant math into the active causal mechanism for physics, or, say, advanced AI.
Okay, let's just clarify what we mean by the fractal just briefly. We're talking about the digital root of a multiplication table in any given base b. And the digital root is just, summing the digits of a number repeatedly until you get a single digit. The really remarkable thing is mapping these across a grid. The patterns, the fractal, they always repeat in a precise tile set. The size is always b minus 1 times b minus 1.
Mm-hmm.
And that b minus 1 by b minus 1 structure, that's critical to my point. It shows the necessary, fundamental nature of this system. It proves how complexity scales. My core thesis is that this fractal is the key to a theory of everything, because it formalizes information translation. Think about the Library of Babel idea mentioned in the source material. How can a high base index, let's say base 64, reliably point to content in base 29? The fractal reveals the shared structure, the mathematical kernel across bases that makes this translation not just possible, but guaranteed. It's the universal translator.
That's an interesting framing, though I'd suggest the ability to translate between bases, converting an index to content, that's arguably an established property of number theory itself, relying on basic multiplication and division properties, whatever base you're at.
But the fractal shows the structure of that transfer. It's dictated by this specific self-similar geometry. That relationship guarantees infinite self-similarity across scales, which is, well, that's the signature of a foundational blueprint, isn't it? And look at the hierarchy. Lower bases summarize higher ones. Base 2, for instance, has a tiny, trivial 1-by-1 tile set. Now, if we propose something like time moving forward could be encoded in base 2, while the universe needs something vast, like the base Google concept, 10 to the 100th power, to hold all its complexity, well, the fractal provides the necessary mapping rule between them. Reality becomes fundamentally base relative, and this structure is the key.
Okay, I absolutely acknowledge the mathematical necessity of that b minus 1 times b minus 1 tile set size. But look, this size isn't some sort of miraculous cosmic directive. It's a natural, frankly elegant consequence of taking the digital root, which is functionally the same as calculating modulo b minus 1. The algorithm itself, the one used to generate the fractal, it literally relies on calculating the product modulo x, where x is b minus 1. So this confirms its origin as a pattern dictated by modular arithmetic. It has to repeat every x steps. It's inescapable mathematics. But its mathematical inevitability doesn't automatically grant it the status of a fundamental causal cosmic law.
I'm just not convinced by that because you're focusing only on the algebraic result, the repeating tile set. And you seem to be dismissing the most critical piece, the organizational structure, the zero cross. The zero cross where either I or j is 0, that's the essential boundary. It acts as the mirror point where all tile sets interchange. That demonstrates its central, non-trivial role in how information is architected. This isn't just pattern, it's the mechanism of universal symmetry.
I see why you give it that significance. But let me offer a different perspective. 0 is a necessary boundary in multiplication, absolutely. The product is 0 if any factor is 0. That boundary naturally divides the infinite multiplication table into quadrants. That creates the visible cross. But the core information, the actual digital root patterns, the non-zero products, they reside entirely in the space from 1 to b-1.
But the cross is the interface.
Okay, help me understand then. If the zero cross is truly this universal interface and mirror point, how does that mechanism physically manifest in, say, a quantum system or in the large-scale structure of the cosmos? Are we talking about a literal zero field, or are we perhaps assigning a bit too much cosmological weight to what is essentially a formal mathematical boundary, a boundary separating the positive non-zero information space from the zero origin? The physics, the actual content, seems to be in those repeating non-zero blocks.
The manifestation is the principle of compression itself. The fact that the code generates 9 copies of the tile set, positive, negative, reflected, and that the zero axis fundamentally interrupts and organizes this infinite pattern that dictates how information mirrors across the origin. That interruption is the key interface. It's what allows lower bases like base 2 to summarize higher bases, because everything has to be indexed through that common 0 point. It's the gateway for information transfer.
That's a compelling way to frame the symmetry argument. I'll grant you. But I still tend to think that the expanded 9-copy view is primarily designed to illustrate the inherent periodicity and reflection properties, rather than being the causal mechanism itself. The periodicity of b-1 dictates the tiling. The zero cross just marks the origin point for reflecting those established patterns.
Okay, let's shift this to the scale we're seeing right now. The technological singularity. The sheer exponential scale of modern AI, we're talking 1 trillion plus parameter models like DeepSeek. These systems are, arguably, rapidly converging on this fractal structure. These huge LLMs, they seem to be implicitly discovering these base invariant patterns, simply through scale. This suggests the fractal isn't just interesting math, it's the necessary theoretical framework for understanding the singularity's fruit. We might be watching the omniverse's structure emerge in these optimization matrices.
I absolutely agree that finding optimal compression and, the geometry of embedding spaces is critical in AI right now. However, I'm sorry, I just don't quite buy the direct causal link between this specific digital root fractal and how an LLM actually computes things. Let me explain why. LLMs run on floating point matrices. They use gradient descent, continuous optimization. They aren't explicitly doing base conversions or calculating things modulo b-1.
But the scale.
The leap you're making, it seems to me, is from a correlation of scale to a necessity of mechanism. Now, could the resulting large-scale patterns, the emergent abilities, be analyzed through the lens of the fractal? Sure. Maybe using base-optimized embeddings, or perhaps digital root compression ideas for model distillation. Yes, that's plausible. But then the fractal is an analytical tool, not the computational engine itself. The scale is enormous, yes, but its success relies on statistical approximation and continuous mathematics, not really on the discrete, cyclic nature of digital roots.
But the objective function of an LLM is finding the most efficient compression of vast information. And what the fractal represents is the mathematically most efficient geometry for storing and retrieving information across all possible bases. So if a model reaches sufficient complexity, it arguably must converge on this base invariant structure because that represents the geometry of minimal entropy for transmitting information. The AI's architecture implicitly discovers the universal grammar we're talking about. Functionally, the LLM is discovering the necessity of something like a base Google tile set to handle the complexity of language and data.
I will grant that the fractal offers potentially deep insights into information geometry. And if we assume reality is fundamentally information,
then yes, the fractal describes inherent limits and cycles within that information. But claiming it's the governing mechanism of the cosmos, the theory of everything, that requires demonstrating causality, not just optimization potential. The question still stands. Why was the physical world instantiated in the particular base it occupies? The fractal shows the rules once a base is chosen, but it doesn't seem to explain the choice itself.
Which brings us right to causality in a theory of everything. My stance remains, the relationship between complexity and base size is causal. The universe's vast complexity requires an encoding base of enormous size, the base Google tileset concept. The complexity we observe is the result of that huge tileset. And the laws of physics, those compact, elegant equations we use, they're simply the indices, the compact pointers to specific pages in that cosmic library. The fractal provides the necessary mapping rule, the causal link, between the potential of base Google and our observed physical laws. Without the fractal, that mapping feels arbitrary. With it, the structure becomes necessary.
I do acknowledge the elegance of using the fractal to map complex subjects to a per-base understanding. For instance, encoding English in, say, base 30,000 to capture its complexity using the fractal. That's a highly sophisticated form of data representation, way beyond simple base conversion. However, and this is the crucial distinction for me, sophisticated representation is not the same as cosmic governance. We're using the pattern to organize the data of the universe, which might be highly effective, but we haven't proven that the universe's actual physical operation is governed by the digital root multiplication table itself. It's still possible the pattern merely reflects the periodicity that mathematics inherently dictates without causing the physical reality we see.
And we also have to consider the intellectual limitation imposed by our own history, humanity's long-standing base 10 focus. This cognitive bias, I think, is precisely why many established mathematicians might struggle initially to grasp the revolutionary implications here. We're so conditioned by decimal thinking that the idea of a structure existing universally across all possible bases is conceptually, well, jarring. This resistance itself suggests the fractal's potential to shake up number theory and maybe AI matrix analysis, because it demands we shed those ingrained biases.
I absolutely agree that recognizing base 10 limitations is vital for progress, and the fractal of ceneeze certainly opens up potentially fascinating new avenues in number theory around modular arithmetic across bases. However, professional skepticism isn't just cognitive resistance, it's intellectual rigor. Skepticism from mathematicians often stems from needing to distinguish between a pure mathematical structure's, yes, undeniable elegance, and its immediate literal applicability as a causal model for complex, messy, non-ideal physical systems. The pattern's beauty doesn't automatically grant it universal governance over the physical world. The burden of proof for causality, well, it remains high.
So, to summarize my position, the fractal of scene is, I argue, a profound mathematical structure revealing the core, fundamental mechanism of information transfer between different realities or bases. Its organizational principles, particularly the zero cross and the tile-set periodicity, aren't just descriptive, they are causal. This fractal is the essential blueprint needed to interpret the largest AI models and to understand the deterministic architecture of cosmic data. It's the universal grammar for the omniverse.
My position is that the fractal offers a beautiful, truly crucial insight into the cyclic, symmetric patterns inherent in modular arithmetic and digital roots. It provides an exceptional analytical tool for summarizing and comprehending information structure across different bases. However, its status as a causal, fundamental blueprint that dictates the universe's operation, rather than simply reflecting mathematical symmetries, remains for me a powerful and compelling hypothesis. But it's one that requires rigorous experimental and frankly philosophical verification. It's not yet a proven mechanism.
We've really only just scratched the surface of what it means to consider reality as a system expressed through different mathematical bases, all linked by this fractal structure. Whether it's the engine driving reality or a mirror reflecting it, that's the core question still open to, deep inquiry.
Absolutely. And the value, I think, lies in rigorously pursuing both avenues. acknowledging the fractal's undeniable mathematical elegance while constantly testing its implications against the often messy realities of physics and emerging technologies like AI. There's much more to explore here.